David. Welcome.
How are you? Good morning from California.
All right. Good afternoon from Portugal.
Boa tarde.
Yeah. So I'd like to start with the 1 million question. $1 million question. Is a non-polarized world in utopia?
I don't believe in utopias. I think utopias have always been, there's a wonderful aspiration to make life better, to improve on the problems that we see. But the idea that there is ever an end state that is the optimal end state is just something that, at least from a historical perspective, but also from a personal perspective, where I try to bring things back to, isn't attainable. I have a moment of health today, but tomorrow or in 5 minutes I may not, because the only constant is change. And so rather than fixating on some abstract notion of perfection, I find that it's better to engage in a very clinical assessment of what is in front of us. Is it optimal? Is it not? To the extent that it isn't, understand the root causes for it. And then to engage in either individual activity or group activity to make it a little bit better. And so there is a constant personal and societal perfection and improvement based upon what we've learned. And I think in the past 100 years globally, the revolution and progress, notwithstanding the challenges that we face, shows that trajectory of making things a little bit better. But for me, utopia is always something I worry a lot about, Maria.
It's common sense that polarization isn't helping. And in order to understand how can we change it, we wish to listen to your vision of it.
So let me speak to at least what we're seeing in the United States right now. As many of you know or may have heard, our election ends in 8 days. There will probably be about 150 million Americans. And to give you a sense of how tight things are, at the presidential level between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Harris, essentially there is a tie, evenly divided. In our legislative races for the United States Senate and for the United States House of Representatives, a tie. In terms of our 50 states, there are almost as many that are controlled by Democrats as there are by Republicans, a tie. That in and of itself is not a bad thing. You could say that that's a level of equilibrium, that there is a balance there that requires both sides to engage with the other side in a way that builds consensus to move forward. Polarization is a little bit different. One of the statistics that I see that is the most challenging in the United States is that when you ask someone if you would be upset if your child married someone of the other party, it's almost 3/4 to 80% say that as one of the most profoundly demeaning things that could happen. In addition to that, we use the language of enemy rather than a temporary opposition. And I think what we're seeing here, Maria, is this unbelievable moment of rapid transition that is caused by massive communication changes. The fact that on a daily basis, each one of us, on our phones, on our screens, on our laptops and our tablets, are receiving thousands of bits of information that are stoked and intended to stoke anger and jealousy and fear and pride and envy and a variety of other things that then move us from a place of wanting to work with someone into opposition. So that's one piece. There's an economic change that's occurring that is de-emphasizing other parts of the economy. And when we have these moments of transition, resentments build, fear builds, anxiety builds. How can I guarantee that my son or daughter will have a better world than I have? Again, fear can be stoked. And then the third piece is, with the world as small as it is right now, and in Europe, it's via the lens of the migrant crisis. Here in the United States, we're seeing something else. You put all these things together and you have the recipe for fear and anger and anxiety that's caused by rapid change. And so my hope, especially once we get past this election, that will be as close as it is, that we can get to a place where we begin first with the exercise of understanding what the flow of information on a daily basis is doing to us. Because you can look downstream at bigger causes, you can look downstream at society, but unless all of us can, in my opinion, understand how we are constantly in this hypersensory disequilibrium that is then resulting in anger, anxiety, fear, opposition, polarization, I don't see how we get out of it without at least building those disciplines internally first that can get us down that path.
There are major subjects that are frightening, especially the young people, like regarding the future. We are scared of so many things. We don't know what's going to happen with the AI, and climate change is here. So how can we make it this self-development and this inner place of stability possible?
So this is where a critique that I have had with many of my friends, especially in the climate movement, and I understand it. When you raise the stakes and you raise the alarm, and the language is the language of doom and destruction, the paradox is that in general, that makes people hunker down. It makes them turn away. It makes them say, well, what's the point? It's too big to do it. Rather than what I said at the beginning in terms of here's where we are, but here is an optimistic or a realistic view around technology being part of the solution, just as you just saw in the previous presentation. Governments coming together being part of the solution, economic factors being part of the solution. Perhaps not to the place where we want to be, but the forward progress that you can then say, yes, things are bad, the direction isn't where we want it to be, but here is the path, rather than engaging in the way the media covers the climate crisis, precisely as we have 8 years left. And what I have seen in hundreds of nights of focus groups is when you say that to people, what you're hoping is that it will generate action. What it does is it creates this kind of retreat that people can't focus. And AI, Maria, I believe is the same thing. There are parts of it that I think just challenge humanity to think about who we are in a way that is frightening. There are other parts of it that are some of the most extraordinary things that you've ever thought about in terms of personal learning, in precision medicine, in other factors. And so my ask of folks in that room is, no matter what the thing you're working on and the challenge you're trying to overcome, a clinical assessment that then anchors around, here are the possible solutions that are based upon individual agency as a necessary predicate, but then also the understanding that none of us does anything alone. We are not automatons in that way to move things forward. And so it's a mindset shift, even around the movements and the coalitions, in terms of what we can and should be doing.
Wow, you said beautiful words. Mindset shift, coalitions, yeah, collaboration, that's what we need. Do you have any vision of how can we face the global migration that's about to happen, that it's already happening, and how is the impact of that in the daily life of people all around the world?
Yeah, and it's the the migration issue in the United States right now is driving the presidential election. It is driving what's going to happen in 8 days. I don't know who's going to win and who's going to lose, but immigration or migration is a number one or number two issue right below inflation and cost of living. And so a different idea, a different mindset of saying, how do we deal with it at the border? How do you engage in a root cause, at least as it relates to the United States, in terms of Central and South America? And what is causing people to leave? Violence, lack of economic opportunity, climate degradation, gangs, crime, a variety of things where people are taking that journey up north through the deserts to get to the United States of America with the hope that their lives are better. If there was opportunity, if there was greater safety in the region, then you wouldn't see that type of flow. And so rather than addressing the problem when it gets to your door, smart ideas about investing in the challenge in the region, in partnership with governments, in partnership with regional coalitions of people, is, I think, a direction that I have heard both from Vice President Harris and to a lesser extent from former President Trump about dealing with the root cause first before it becomes a problem here. And so that's again that getting back to that sense of equilibrium. If I have a clinical understanding of what is happening and what the root causes are, then I can begin to construct solutions that aren't about sound bites, they aren't about ads, it's not about the left versus the right. It's about engaging in a way at the source that I think that there's an appetite for. And the reason I think there's an appetite for is that there is nothing more destabilizing, as we're seeing in Europe and in the United States, than migrant crisis that then result in people turning inward from a cultural, from a societal, from an economic, from a political, from a tax perspective, that then creates people saying, this is a challenge. All of us have to address it as a group of nations and individuals. But that's my hope, but hope is not a strategy. So it's going to require people truly engaging.
Beautifully said. I am just launching a book called Rise and Raise Others. So, let's do it for ourselves and let's help everyone to do it as well. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, our time is finished. I wish we could have more of this beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for being with us. And let's hope that this collaboration era is really already ready to be lived from.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Be well. Take care.